I'm Adam in Wales, and this is my board gaming vlog, and today I'm going to give an update on what I've been up to and why I've been absent from this channel for the last few weeks. But also I'm going to, I suppose, get stuck into a little bit of discussion about so-called thematic gaming and immersive gameplay experiences, those terms that we hear quite a lot. And the reason for that is because I've been playing quite a lot of these games recently, and they're not normally to my tastes. So what have I been playing? Star Wars Destiny, the collectible dice game. This is my first collectible anything game experience. I've also played Star Wars Rebellion for the first time. Yesterday, a long game of Star Wars. I don't think there's any such thing as a short game of Star Wars Rebellion. So I've played that big sort of Fantasy Flight monster that made the number one of a lot of people's 2016 best games lists. And I've recently picked up a new copy of Blood Bowl, the Games Workshop, this re-edition, 2016 edition. I started playing Blood Bowl in 2nd edition in 1988 when I was 10 years old, and so it's kind of something that sort of, you know, that I find quite affecting. Blood Bowl. It's something I remember very fondly from my childhood. But I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about immersion and theme in board games, because I think the term is used differently in board game sort of media and board game design than it is in the sort of wider context. I mean, if we think about board games as an art form, which I do, and as a form of literature, maybe I'm pushing it a little bit, then when we talk about theme in literature, we're not talking about necessarily the setting of a story. We're not talking about the sort of the story itself, the narrative. We're generally talking about something very specific. It's often a one-word thing. It's what the story is about, what it tells us, what it's perhaps a recurring sort of message that comes through the story. So if we take Star Wars, for example, what are the themes in Star Wars? In the broadest sense, there's war, but that's probably the least interesting theme in there because it is so broad. Within that, we've got themes of sort of family connections and loss and betrayal and sacrifice. We've got the sort of theme of nature versus technology and spirituality. All these things are themes within Star Wars. Love and hate. Now, are those themes in Star Wars Destiny, the collectible dice game? Or are those themes in Star Wars Rebellion? I would say largely no. Largely those themes are not there. The themes we have in Star Wars Rebellion and Star Wars Destiny are largely themes of, I don't even know if you can call it a theme, you know, fighting and war, perhaps struggle. I mean, these are very broad, not particularly interesting themes. Okay, now the narrative is there. We have the setting of the Star Wars universe, and we have the narrative of this happens and then this happens and then this happens. But that is a slightly different thing to theme. Now, I might be nitpicking a little bit here, but it leads me into my next point, which is about immersion. How do we get immersed in games? Is it enough to just simply have this really rich theme which is illustrated with lavish artwork and lots of flavour text and things like that? When I hear the board game media talk about immersive gameplay experiences, they tend to mean, okay, we've got artwork, we've got the characters have names, they have backstories, they have flavour text on there. That isn't what immerses me in a game. Now, it might be what immerses you. I mean, there's some evidence, I suppose, that people have different learning styles. Okay, I know this often comes up in education, and it's controversial because whether we can use those learning styles to teach people is an arguable thing. But I think it's fairly well established that people prefer a certain way of learning. They find there's a certain thing that will immerse them in a problem or an activity. So that might be visual information. People might prefer drawings and videos and things like this. It might be auditory. People might immerse themselves because of sound, soundtracks, stuff like that, noises. People might immerse themselves because of the written word. They might read or write in order to immerse themselves in something. It might be kinesthetic. It might be the movement and spatial sort of placing of things. It might be to do with logic and reasoning. People might immerse themselves because of mathematical and logical problems. They might immerse themselves if they manage to work socially within a group, or they might immerse themselves if they are able to work alone. And everybody will have different preferences on that sort of spectrum. And I say spectrum because I don't think anyone is any one thing. But I know myself that I struggle with reading novels, for example. I just don't get into them. Occasionally I do, but I'm much more likely to manage to immerse myself in a graphic novel. And for a long time that's been a bit of a guilty secret of mine, and I don't really get novels. It makes me feel a bit stupid that other people who I think are really intelligent and they read a lot, and there's me, and the only things I can get into are graphic novels and plays. Oddly, I do like reading plays, and I can really immerse myself in that. I can immerse myself in television. The visual and auditory thing really works for me, and theatre, just that directness. Now, where does this take us with board games? Well, what does Star Wars Rebellion offer us? It offers us a long gameplay experience between two people with limited social interaction, lots of gameplay interaction, but there's not much in the way of negotiation or lying or bluffing or anything like that. So the social learners, they're out. Okay, there's nothing auditory in there, so they're out. Visually, yeah, it's quite a visual sort of feast. And certainly there's lots of text there. Now, as I said, text is not something that I find particularly immersive. Tactile, well, the pieces are three-dimensional, but essentially we're just pushing them across the board, so I would say no, there's not that kinesthetic sort of thing. There's some logic and reasoning, but that's often upset by the other players' actions and by randomness in the game, and so for me it doesn't quite fulfill what I want from a logic reasoning sort of experience. So for me, I didn't find it very immersive. Not really. I found it sort of nostalgic to look at the characters, and it broadly told me a story in the way that a novel would tell me a story. So I see that Chewbacca moves to this planet, and then Boba Fett comes into that planet, and Boba Fett tries to capture Chewbacca, but I play a card which says that Chewbacca escapes because he's got a guardian. Okay. Now, I have no agency there. I'm playing a card that says Chewbacca escapes. I'm not making him escape. I'm not doing anything to do that. Recently, Actual John, who is another YouTuber from the UK who's very popular and has lots of subscribers, you should go and look at his channel, it's very good. He did a review of Mansions of Madness, and he pointed out that in that game, which is supposed to be totally immersive, and all the more so because of its new app, that in that game, you might pick up a card that tells you you've gathered some evidence. And you're trying to solve a mystery here. But the card says you've gathered evidence. And once you've collected enough of these cards that say you've gathered evidence, then you've solved the mystery. That's not immersive. There's no agency there. It's just a card that says evidence. Why not give us some evidence, and then we can do the logical deduction required to immerse ourselves in the game? If we look at a game like Dr. Eureka. In Dr. Eureka, everyone has 3 of these test tubes with these little balls in them of the 3 different colours. And what happens is they turn over a card, and then everyone will try and solve this puzzle at the same time. And they're not allowed to let the balls touch the table, and they're not allowed to touch the balls themselves. So you have to do it by tipping these things between the different containers. So, for example, I'll stick that in there, and what am I going to do now? Let's go in there, and this is terrible. I'm doing really badly. Let's stick that in there, and then I can get one of them in there. That goes in there. And I'm racing against my opponents to do this. In fact, most people would have done this by now. I'm just particularly bad at the game. So let's put that in there, and that in there. And I think I'm done. There you go. Then if I do that before the other player, I score the card, we turn over a new one, and we do the same thing again. That's Dr. Eureka. So Dr. Eureka, immersive? Absolutely immersive. I'm totally engaged in a task. I have absolute agency. It's my job to put those balls from that test tube into the other test tube. I've got a job to do, and I've got to do it before the other player. It's tactile. It's got some sort of logical reasoning, but also the kinesthetic thing of moving the balls about. It's got social interaction, that race. I've got to do it before the other player, and the frustration of doing one card after another. Now, is it thematic? No. There's no theme there. No theme at all. I mean, what would the theme be? I can't even put a theme onto it. It's got a setting, and what it has is this idea of puts me into a role. I'm a doctor, a lab a physician, or a chemist, or something like that, and I'm mixing these things together, and I'm actually doing something that role would do. You know, it's Star Wars Rebellion. I'm a Wookiee. Okay, what does a Wookiee do? Goes around and bashes people and makes weird noises. Am I doing any of those things? No. I'm playing cards and I'm rolling dice. That, for me, is one level of abstraction that makes it difficult for me to immerse myself. And that's not true of all games. I do frequently manage to immerse myself in abstracted games, but it's usually where the activity is in itself immersive. It's got some really interesting logic or reasoning sort of activity to take on. Lavish artwork really helps, and nice tactile pieces. I came from a background of theatre in education. So about 10 years ago, I was working a lot in little theatre and education companies around Wales. And theatre and education in the UK has connotations of legs akimbo, the old League of Gentlemen, two men in a little van going around schools and teaching them about, hey, strangers are dangerous, and you know, it's all a bit naff and a bit cheap. It wasn't like that in Wales, not 10 years ago anyway. It was kind of the backbone of Welsh theatre through the 60s and 70s, and it was high quality stuff, and a lot of it was based on Dorothy Heathcote's Mantle of the Expert. So Mantle of the Expert is another educational sort of tool whereby we put children into roles. So if we want to teach them something, if we want to immerse them in an activity, then we say to them, this is fictional. We don't tell them, we don't lie to them and say you're actually doing this, but we say to them, right, okay, you're running a travel agency, and we give them a role. You're the travel agent. So all your art lessons are going to be about creating posters to advertise your travel agency, and all the history is going to be about history of those different locations, and geography will be based around that, and maths will be about doing the accounts for your travel agency, and this is giving them that sort of expert role, which is what a good board game does too. It tells me who I am, and then I take that on and I try and sort of work from that basis. Now, some games you're one individual character and you go on from there, and others you control a group of characters. So like Flashpoint Fire Rescue is an example of a game that I really enjoy, where I take on one role, and what I'm doing, yeah, it's totally abstracted, isn't it? I don't get the smell of the smoke, and I don't get the sort of noises and that sort of thing, but I do get the sort of tension, the fear of that fire hitting my person, or even worse, hitting one of the survivors in the building and killing them before I can get to them. Because that's what immersion's about as well, isn't it? It's about, what do we want in a game? A bit like a piece of drama. What do we want? We want to survive. We don't want to die. We want pleasurable experiences, whether that's love, or whether it's sex, or whether it's other sensual experiences like food, or you know, all manner of different things like this. Are there any threats to those things in a game like Star Wars Rebellion? Is there any joy to be had there? No one's really seeking out joy in that game. Is there a threat of death? There is, on a sort of global scale. We might see a planet blow up. We might see a unit of troops destroyed. But Princess Leia can't be killed. Or Darth Vader can't be killed. Or Emperor Palpatine can't be killed. And so you don't have that sense of threat, and you don't have that sense of ownership of taking on those roles. I mean, who am I in that game? Am I some sort of master tactician sending players out? I don't know. I don't know who I am. That's true of quite a lot of games, actually. I don't know who I am in the game. But it's quite nice when a game does provide you that thing. Let's take a look at Flick 'em Up. In Flick 'em Up, players split into 2 teams of cowboys. A scenario is picked from the scenario book, and the table is prepared accordingly. Cowboys move by flicking a movement disc and relocating. The disc may not hit anything or the move fails. Cowboys shoot by flicking a bullet disc. If it knocks a cowboy over, they take a wound. Each cowboy can take 3 wounds before they die, but they never take wounds if they're lying down on the table. Each cowboy takes 2 actions, moving and or shooting, and then the process is repeated until the scenario objectives are met. Some scenarios will have players entering buildings, or dueling 1-on-1, or 2-on-1. Or stealing gold, or rescuing a non-player character. The set includes rules for rifles and dynamite and gallows scenarios, and it also leaves it open for players to create their own scenarios. Now in Flick 'em Up, when I flick that bullet, when I get down there onto the table and I flick the bullet at another person, I'm doing it. I have agency there. I'm doing the action that gets the result that I want. The story is clear. I find that immersive. Where am I going with all of this? I don't know. Somehow, I'll tell you what. Let's move on. Let's forget about. I'm going to stop getting angry about the terms theme and immersive gameplay, and I'm going to talk about something else. So let's talk about collectible card games. I've never got into a collectible card game before. And I've often read and heard, again on Board Game Media, about how awful CCGs are. This Magic the Gathering thing, and how the collectability and all of that, how it's so unfair, how it rips people off because they're getting things they don't want and all of that. And I totally agree that if you have not got enough disposable income, then these are probably not the things for you. And the problem is that they are aimed at children and teenagers who probably don't have that much money or that much sense in order to stop them from buying again and again and again. But as my first experience of a collectible game, I've really enjoyed Star Wars Destiny. There is something really exciting about opening a little packet, not knowing what you're going to get. It was cheap. You know, it didn't cost me a fortune. If I get something I didn't really want, well, there's a minor disappointment. But the next one I open will have something really exciting. And wow, now I've got Jabba the Hutt. You know, that's quite an exciting sort of thing to me and a new experience. I'm not going to invest loads of money into this. I've picked up enough actually to have a good game with my friend. And I'll probably buy a few more boosters from time to time. But that's about it. It reminds me of the excitement of buying Panini stickers when I was a kid and filling up those sticker books. That was always very exciting. So collectible card games is something new for me for 2017. And Star Wars Destiny, actually, I can recommend as a dice game. It's really good. Not immersive. Although you've only got 1 or 2 characters, so you can just buy into it enough and the actions all make sense, and so it does have an element of narrative in it, even if, using our broader sort of literature term, theme is absent. I should say at this point, this all sounds a little bit pretentious, doesn't it? Because I do accept that theme is board gaming jargon and it has a different meaning within the board gaming context. Theme means the broad, all-encompassing thing of artwork and narrative and intellectual property and all the rest of it. I get that. I get that it's different in board games, but for the purposes of this video, I really wanted to pin down what is it that makes me engage with a game and how that might be different for different people with their different tastes. The other thing that makes me engage with a game is nostalgia. And one really nostalgic experience that I've had recently is the re-release of the game. Let me grab it now. Blood Bowl. Now, Blood Bowl is Games Workshop's game. It came out, I can't remember when it originally was, but I had the second edition in 1988 when I was 10 years old, and I played it throughout my teenage years. It's, if I think of board games from my teenage years, then that is the one that I played a lot of. It's long, It's outdated, it's extremely luck-based with all the dice rolls, and everything is about mitigating that luck and pushing your luck, and that can lead to a frustrating experience. There's a lot of modelling required, and and building and painting of models and all this sort of thing. Not usually something I would get heavily into, but the nostalgia factor here is high. I think I like this game for the same reason that a lot of people are going to like things like Star Wars Rebellion. Nostalgia. Oh, it's all about Star Wars. Here, it's all about Blood Bowl. It's about Griff Oberwald and Morgan Thorg and all the tree men and the halflings, and I find it quite exciting, Blood Bowl, and I've been painting a lot of these figures over the last few weeks. In fact, let's take a little look at some of the figures. So here is a human from the 2016 edition of Blood Bowl, and I just wanted to compare it really to a human from the old 1988 version, and you can see how much better Games Workshop has got at doing these sort of dynamic poses. Excuse the bad paint jobs. I'm a particularly I rush my painting. I do it really fast, and sometimes I'll sit down and play and do some painting with Tom, my friend, and he will take ages to do one figure. He'll do it beautifully, and I'll get 7 figures done in the same time, and they're all a little bit rushed, and I never quite keep to the lines. And this is even worse because I did it years ago, and in fact my fingernails are showing that they've got paint all over them. So you can see I've been doing some work on this morning. So here we are. There is a human. Here's another one in a nice dynamic pose. How much better are these than the old Blood Bowl figures from the 80s? Again, if we have a look at a Skaven, so this is a little rat man. He's back from 2nd edition, 1988, this little Skaven. Look at them now. Look at what the rats are like now. And this is plastic, this one's metal. So things have really improved, and they were really fun to paint. I haven't actually played the game yet, but the rules haven't actually changed at all, which leads me to believe it'll be quite a long, frustrating affair, but I'll still love it because of the nostalgia. Finally, I wanted to show you this old model, again, back from 1988. This guy is a big metal troll. Look how not dynamic his pose is, just sort of standing there looking gormless with his massive hand. Now, he was covered in layers and layers of childhood paint. He looked awful until fairly recently. I got him out and stuck him in a bowl of Dettol, soaked all the paint off, and I was surprised by how much detail there is on this old metal model. Because, to be honest, even after soaking it, I thought, God, that model looks awful. But it all came together quite nicely, in a sense. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Games Workshop will do with the big guys like this. A big sort of new troll in a dynamic pose will be quite exciting to have. So I think that's about it. Long, rambling vlog today. If you enjoyed it, and I don't know why you would, I'm Adam in Wales. This is my channel, Adam's Board Game Wales. Please subscribe to it, and please follow me on Twitter at Board Game Wales, or on Board Game Geek, I'm Adam78. Thank you very much for watching. All the best.